Section 19 of The Man of Genius by Cesare Lombroso. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recorded by Leon Harvey. Chapter 4. Sane Men of Genius. Their unperceived defects. Reculeo, Sesostris, Foscolo, Michelangelo, Darwin. But a graver objection is that afforded by those few men of genius who have completed their intellectual orbit without aberration, neither depressed by misfortune nor thrown out of their course by madness. Such have been Galileo, Leonardo da Vinci, Voltaire, Machiavelli, Michelangelo, Darwin. Each one of these showed by the ample volume and at the same time the symmetrical proportion of the skull, force of intellect restrained by the calm of the desires. Not one of them allowed his great passion for truth and beauty to stifle the love of family and country. They never changed their faithful character, never swerved from their aim, never left their work half completed. What assurance, what faith, what ability they showed in their undertakings, and above all, what moderation and unity of character they preserved in their lives. Though they too had to experience, after undergoing the sublime paroxysm of inspiration, the torture inflicted by ignorant hatred, and the discomfort of uncertainty and exhaustion, they never, on that account, deviated from the straight road. They carried out to the end the one cherished idea which formed the aim and purpose of their lives, calm and serene, never complaining of obstacles, and falling into a few mistakes which, in lesser men, might even have passed for discoveries. But I have already answered, in the opening pages of this book, the objection furnished by these rare exceptions, pointing out that epilepsy and moral insanity, which is its first variety, often pass unobserved, not only in distinguished men, the prestige of whose name and work dazzles our judgment and prevents our discerning them, but in those criminals to whom such researches might at least restore self-respect by depriving them of all responsibility. Who, but for the revelations of some of his intimate friends, would have suspected that Cavour was repeatedly subject to attacks of suicidal mania, or thought that Reculeo was epileptic? No one would have paid any attention to the morbid impulsiveness of Foscolo, or recorded as a symptom, if Davies had not examined his skull after death. Who could make any assertion with regard to the moral sense of Sesostris? Yet, as Arvid Barain justly remarks, his skull completely corresponds with the criminal type. The low and narrow forehead, prominent superciliary arc, thick eyebrows, eyes set close together, long, narrow aquiline nose, hollow temples, projecting cheekbones, strong jaws, the expression not intelligent but animal, fierce, proud and majestic, the head small in proportion to the body, are all so many indications of the most complete absence of moral sense. In all the biographies of Michelangelo, we do not discover one spot on that gentle yet robust soul who trembled for the sorrows of his country as at the expression of beauty, but the publication of his letters and the keen researches of Par le Greco have revealed physical anomalies never before suspected. One of the most important is his complete indifference to women. This may be observed in his works, and his masterpieces were all masculine: Moses, Lorenzo, Giuliano de Medici, etc. He never used, it appears, the living female model, though he made use of corpses. His Bacchanate is a virago with masculine muscles, unformed breasts, and no feminine touch. In his many love sonnets, written rather to follow the prevailing fashion than from any true inspiration of passion, none bear the mark of being addressed to real women. Only 14 times, it is said, does the word donna occur. On the other hand, in the Barbera collection, sonnets 18 and 12 show a very marked admiration for the male, and Varcai considers that these are addressed to Cavaliere, who was of great physical beauty. There are in existence 2 of his letters addressed to Cavaliere, July 28, 1523, July 28, 1532, which seem to be written to a mistress, and in which, humiliating himself, he swears that, if banished from the other's heart, he will die. There is a similar letter written to Angelini. This moral anomaly, which he would share with many artists, Cellini, Sodoma, etc., is not the only one to meet with. In his letters, writes Per le Greco, may be seen constant contradictions between ideas that are great and generous, and others which are puerile, between will and speech, between thought and action, extreme irritability, inconstant affection, great activity in doing good, sudden sympathies, great outbursts of enthusiasm, great fears, sometimes unconsciousness of his own actions, marvellous modesty in the field of art, unreasonable vanity in the appearance of life. These are the various psychical manifestations in life of Buonarroti which lead me to believe that the great artist was affected by a neuropathic condition bordering on hysteria. Every day in his old age he discovered some sin in his past life, and he sent money to Florence for masses to be said and for alms to the poor, and to enable poor girls to be married, and, which is stranger, to be made nuns. All of this was to gain paradise. Letter 187, 214, 240, 330, to save his soul. He who had said, "It is not strange that the monks should spoil a chapel at the Vatican, since they have known how to spoil the whole world." At some moments he feels that his conscience is clean, and then he desires to die, so that he may not fall back into evil. But then his discouragement returns, and he believes, strange blasphemy, that it was a sin to have been born an artist. Conosco di quaintera terra carica, lea fatusa fantasia, cella art mi fec idolo e monarca, li perol del mondo mi hanno tolto, il tempo dato a contemplare Dio. And he believes himself destined by God to a long life simply that he may complete the fabric of St. Peter's. In old age, he who had shown so little vanity where his work was concerned and so much modesty in speaking of it, went about studying how he could best exhibit the nobility of his descent, claiming to trace in a direct line from the Counts of Canossa, a claim which, even if valid, would not be worth a finger of his Moses. Michelangelo tenderly loved his father and brother and nephews, and enabled them to live in easy circumstances. Yet in his letters to them he frequently shows himself suspicious and treats them unjustly. In 1544 he fell seriously ill at Rome. His nephew naturally hastened to his bedside. Michelangelo became very angry and wrote, "You have come to kill me and to see what I leave behind. Know that I have made my will, and that there is nothing here for you to think about. Therefore go in peace and do not write to me more." 3 months after he changed his tone. "I will not fail in what I have often thought about, that is, in helping you." He has himself left a confession of his almost morbid melancholy in a letter, 97, to Sebastiano del Piombo. "Yesterday evening I was happy because I escaped from my mad and melancholy humour." Without the recent biographical and autobiographical notes published by his son, no one could have imagined that Darwin, a model father and citizen, to self-controlled and even so free from vanity, was a neuropath. His son tells us that for 40 years he never enjoyed 24 hours of health like other men. Of the 8 years devoted to the study of the cirripedes, 2, as he himself writes, were lost through illness. Like all neuropaths, he could bear neither heat nor cold. Half an hour of conversation beyond his habitual time was sufficient to cause insomnia and hinder his work on the following day. He suffered also from dyspepsia, from spinal anemia, and giddiness, which last is known to be frequently the equivalent of epilepsy, and he could not work more than 3 hours a day. He had curious crotchets, finding that eating sweets made him ill. He resolved not to touch them again, but was unable to keep his resolution unless he had repeated it aloud. He had a strange passion for paper, writing the rough drafts of his correspondence on the back of proof sheets, and of the most important MSS, which thus rendered difficult to decipher. He often instituted what he himself called fool's experiments, e.g. having a bassoon played close to the cotyledons of a plant. When about to make an experiment, he seemed to be urged on by some inward force. From a morbid dislike to novelty, he used the millimetric tables of an old book, which he knew to be inaccurate, but to which he was accustomed. He would not change his old chemical balance, though aware that it was untrustworthy. He refused to believe in hypnotism, and also at first in the discovery of prehistoric stone weapons. He frequently says his daughter inverted his sentences, both in speaking and writing, and had a difficulty in pronouncing some letters, especially W. Like Skoda, Rikitansky, and Socrates, he had a short snub nose, and his ears were large and long. Nor were degenerative characteristics wanting among his ancestors. It is true that he reckoned among them several men of intellect and almost genius, which, as Robert, 1682, a botanist and intelligent observer, and Edward, author of a gamekeeper's manual, full of acute observations on animals. His father had great powers of observation, but his paternal grandfather, Erasmus, poet and naturalist at the same time, had a passionate temper and an impediment to his speech. One of his sons, Charles, a poet and collector, resembled him in this respect. Finally, another uncle, Erasmus, a man of some intellect, a numismatist and statistician, ended by madness and suicide. It might be objected that the fact of such different forms of psychosis, melancholy, moral insanity, monomania, being found either complete or undeveloped in men of genius, excludes the special psychosis of genius, and still more that of epilepsy. But it may be answered that recent research, which has enlarged the domain of epilepsy, has also demonstrated that, apart from impulsive and hallucinatory delusions, epilepsy may be superannuated to any form of mental alienation, especially megalomania and moral insanity, and, as is the case in nearly all degenerative psychoses, undeveloped forms of mental disease and recurring multiform delusions brought on by the most trivial causes especially predominate in epilepsy. End of section 19.